Hello, JRN1 students, and yeah, this is probably going to be our last lecture together. So yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting to you, and I hope that you haven't fallen asleep too often to my voice on the video. So in the meantime, let's look at the summary of the work that we've done this semester. Our news basics are: use the 5 W's and the H. The who, what, when, where, why, and how. And okay, you guys will notice that I'm taking this from a document. This document is on Cole Campus. So if you want to run through it and you can't actually see it on this screen, on this video, then you can open it up and listen to what I'm saying and look at the document and follow it as well. But basically, yes, I've got an example here from a source on news24.com. It's an article called Exodus, Uncovering Sexual Crimes and Missing Millions at a KZN Cult, on News24 by a whole bunch of journalists: Tammy Peterson, Azara Karim, Joshka Koistok, and Nogtula Manyati. All very good journalists, by the way. So, we've got here a 50-year-old Christian mission who in, that's your who, in KwaZulu-Natal, that's your where, stands accused of gross violations of human rights, turning a blind eye to sexual abuse and alleged money laundering, and that's your what, spanning 4 decades, and that's your when. Now, you might be tempted to think that your when is after an investigation of 7 months, but in actual fact, the when relates to the what in the same way that the who relates to the what. So what did they do? When did they do it? Over 4 decades, so 40 years, for 40 years. Now, you'll notice, after an investigation of 7 months, News24 can today reveal the depth of the rot at KwaZulu-Natal, one of the biggest missions in Africa, started by German preacher Erla Stegen in 1970 at Kranskop, northern KwaZulu-Natal. So that is your lead, and we'll talk about a lead just now. But I've marked this as how. How do they stand accused of these things? They stand accused of these things through an investigation of 7 months. Okay. The why is not answered in the lead, as this is a complex question. Why are they accused of these acts? And the article will present the reasons using sources, and that again relates directly to the how. How are they accusing after an investigation of 7 months? That's how they managed to accuse this mission of these things. Why are they accused? Because this is what the investigation uncovered. And that, of course, look at that error over there. I must definitely fix that right now. And so this is the why of it. The why is relating to the what, which is those accusations. And here I've given you my source, including the URL. So this is because I don't have a list of references at the end. Please don't do this in your articles. This is a study notes, or this is a set of study notes, not an article and not an academic paper. So I can pretty much do what I want here, but don't do this when you are referencing. So you must put the most interesting and newsworthy bits of information first in the lead. Okay, the lead is the first 1 or 2 sentences in the story, and there, as you can see, is our lead as an example. The headline is the title of the news story, and that is Exodus, Uncovering Sexual Crimes and Missing Millions at a KZN Cult. Usually it's written in very large font, much larger than all the other fonts on the page, and this is the only time where you can use incomplete sentences. Man bites dog, or, tree falls on pedestrian, as opposed to a man bites a dog, or a tree falls on a pedestrian. So these are some rules for writing. Never put yourself into the story. Never ever put yourself into the story. The journalist must be the vehicle, the vessel for reporting the facts, not the protagonist of the story, not the main feature. The main feature is the news. The journalist is the tool by which the news is reported. So never ever put yourself into the story, unless you are asked to do what you've been asked to do for the S1, which is compare your experience of lockdown to that of a friend. So the brief will tell you when you can, but by default you can't. Never use I, me, we, our, or us. I have a lot of students, when they write news articles for me, they go our land, which is great because there's nothing wrong with being proud of South Africa and referring to it as our land. It is our land, but a journalist doesn't do that. A journalist says the country or South Africa. Okay. Only use first names. Never only use first names. When you introduce any source or any person in your article, you use their full name the first time, and then thereafter you refer to them as their surname. So, if we're looking at Jacob Zuma, you would say former President Jacob Zuma, and then thereafter you would say Zuma only. Don't ever use texting language. Don't mix letters and numbers to make a word. Don't use emojis. Don't use, for example, there I've got there the letter U instead of YOU. This is a very, very important aspect to writing that you must not forget. When you are writing for an audience, you have to show that you have respect for the language in which you are writing, as well as respect for yourself. Because the moment that you start writing in this kind of language there, using you instead of YOU, you're telling your audience, firstly, that you don't regard the subject as important enough to use correct language, and you don't regard them as important enough to use correct language for. And also, you're kind of giving away your level of literacy. So you don't want to do that. You want to be professional in your language at all times. And that doesn't just go for writing in English. It goes for writing in any language. If you read Ilanga or Isolezwe, which are primarily Zulu publications, you don't read articles written in Iscamto. You just don't. It doesn't happen. They use proper Zulu without, any of the jargon or the slang or anything like that. And it's exactly the same in any other language. Have respect for the language and have respect for yourself. Always use words for quantities from 1 to 10 and digits for quantities above 10. Okay, so if it's a 4-year-old child, you don't say the number, you don't write the number 4, you write FOUR, 4-year-old child. Introduce a source by his or her full name and thereafter use the surname only. Like I said before, never only use first names. Always introduce a source by his or her full name and then thereafter use the surname. The surname is the last name. A lot of you guys, when you reference as well, I've noticed some of you will give me Vincent as opposed to Filak. Vincent is a first name. Filak is a surname. When you in-text reference or at any other given time, you use the surname rather than the first name. Always separate the facts into smaller groups of related information. So don't give me a word wall, please. No word walls. You must use paragraphs. Always use paragraphs. And group your information together so that it moves logically from one idea to the next. And if there are several facts relating to one particular idea, then group them together in the same area of the article, as opposed to, spreading them out. Use insightful and relevant quotes in an article to give it credibility. And always write in full sentences, again. Now, there is one thing that I have to sort of just add in here on the lead. The lead puts the most interesting and newsworthy bits of information first. Writing articles, particularly hard news articles, is not like a striptease. Guys, there's no foreplay in journalism in hard news. You don't give a little bit and then give a little bit later. It's not like that. Okay, it's the other way around. With hard news, you have the main event first. That's it. And then afterwards you can cuddle. But there's no like give a little bit away first and then give another little important fact later on in the article. You want all of your important facts first, and you want to put your main event, your most important fact, before anything else. You can see that in the lead, because the lead says this Christian mission in KwaZulu-Natal has been accused of all of these things: violations of human rights, sexual abuse, money laundering. Those things are the showstopper for this article. Those are the most important bits of information that the journalists managed to uncover, and they have summarized it in that way, in the lead. Then afterwards, then you can go and explain it and elaborate on whatever it is. But, it's not a case of going, well, stands accused of human rights, and then halfway down the page, oh, and also sexual abuse, and then towards the end, oh, and also money laundering. That is not the way to write a hard news article. You have to put your most important information first, the information that stands out. You'll remember in the F1 when you had that article to write, and please be aware that I wasn't marking that too strictly because you hadn't done all of the writing content that you needed to write a proper news article, but it was a chance for you to give it a go and try and apply what you've learned so far. And what I noticed was that you guys started with, traffic was slow, traffic was backed up. You didn't say, and I felt that this was the most important part of the list or the information that you gathered. You didn't say 2 drivers ended up having a fist fight in the middle of the road after having an accident on the N3. That's something that you don't see very often. Accidents happen all the time, and fender benders happen all the time, and it doesn't really matter that much to people, especially if no one's hurt or killed. No one was hurt or killed. It was a fender bender. The reason why they stopped traffic was because the 2 people got out and started to fight with each other in the middle of the freeway. So that is your showstopper. That is the part that people don't see every day, and that's what's going to draw people in to the news article. So you want to put that first. You want to identify the most important facts in your collection of facts that you've got from your interview, and then put the most important bit first. And you should use that in your S1 as well. The thing is that each of you will have your own interview with your friend, and you will do a comparison of what it was like for you guys under lockdown. Find the similarities, find the differences, and that's all well and good. But when you come down to it, you've got to look at that information that you've got from your source for your article and go, what is the thing that stands out most for me? What is the weirdest, the freakiest, the most amazing, the most interesting piece of information? And that's what you start your article with. Okay. Let's go further down. Don't ever add spice. Don't ever add spice. And once again, for the people in the back, don't ever add spice. Don't make stuff up to make it more interesting. In fact, don't make stuff up at all. That's not what journalism is about. What it's about is reporting the facts. Don't include your own opinion, because that's not fact. That's, what you think. It's not necessarily the truth. So don't include your own opinion. Don't try and do tabloid-style sensationalism. If you read the Daily Sun, please don't use that as an example of how to write journalistic articles. It's not a good example. And if you ever end up writing for the Daily Sun, then I will take it as a sign that I have not done my job. Okay? Don't do sensational articles. It's not worth it. You want your soul. Don't do over-dramatization. If it was a fender bender, don't call it a tragic accident, because, what is tragic about a fender bender? No one was hurt, no one was killed. That's not telling the truth or calling it as it is, presenting the facts. In fact, don't use tragic accidents at all. Don't use the word tragic. Don't use emotive language in your reporting if you are reporting hard news, because that will color the way that your readers see the event. So, you're saying tragic accident, and in the meantime, it was actually just a fender bender, and the tragedy was that the people involved were texting and driving or having a road rage issue, and they got out and they started fighting with each other. But it's not necessarily tragic unless someone died. So don't make those value judgments. Those are called personal opinion, and they are called value judgments. Don't include them in your article. Don't include half-truths. The woman in front was texting and driving, but you don't include the fact that the guy behind was also texting and driving and he didn't look when the other woman stopped. Don't twist the facts. Don't try and present things so that they will back up your agenda. Just present the facts as they are, and make sure that you have got the facts backed up by your sources. No spice. Your style guide will set the guidelines, and remember, we've discussed this already. In fact, we've discussed all of this already, but this is a summary. Your style guide will set the guidelines and standardized approach for journalists to use when writing for a particular publication. Remember when we spoke about all of those ways that are all right, but there are different ways for people to approach things like how to write a street name, or whether you use capital N for northern or lowercase n for northern, seeing as it's not actually, the noun, the proper noun north. So, and then also the format to use for time. So the style guide is produced by a publication, and its purpose is to standardize one way of approaching the reporting of certain things, so that everyone is using the same kind of format and it looks neater, and you don't have to, stop and dig out the ideas. And it's more professional. It helps journalists to present articles that are more professional overall. It's also, style guides also are representative these days of the sort of political standpoints and ethical standpoints of publications. For example, some style guides will say, don't call them lesbian couples or gay couples, call them same-sex couples, because it's less offensive, it's more politically correct, whatever. That kind of thing may or may not appear in a style guide, depending on how big the publication is and also, what their leanings are. If it doesn't really matter to them, then they're not going to put it in there just to make it thicker. Okay. Sub-editors are the people who are responsible for ensuring that articles meet the standards set out by the style guide, do not present any legal obstacles, and have appropriate headlines and captions for images, and also that articles are polished and proofed and there are no typos or errors. Okay, love your subs. Photographs or images give a visual connection to the story. If you look at an image at the top of on the front page of a newspaper, it'll always be colorful. There will always be some kind of action happening. It'll always explain what has happened in an event, and often, if you're standing in line and you see a newspaper, you'll be drawn to the newspaper by the image on the front. So you're not drawn to the newspaper by A, the headline, or B, the tiny font with the story. It's the photo, it's the image that draws you first. Okay? So it gives you a visual connection to the story. Captions will tell the reader what to look for in the image or what to look at in the image, and they will link the information in the story to the image. Please don't give me a sentence from your story as a caption, because then you're just repeating information and it's a waste of space. Your caption should link the image to the information that you've already presented. And then your quotes tell the story in the words of the source and lend the article credibility. Please, when you have quotes, don't use quotes like, "It's fine," or "I'm okay." Those are redundant, they are unnecessary and pointless and irrelevant. If you're going to use quotes that add value to the story. Remember that quotes are used to tell the story from a personal point of view. You, as the journalist, cannot do that. So you find people who can, and those are your sources. Those are the people that you quote. You find the interesting, useful bits that they say to you, and that stand out for you, and that's what you use as a quote. Also, they lend the article credibility, because then it's not just you saying what happened. You're also, using other people's words. You're quoting people who know what they're talking about. The journalist is not expected to be an expert in any particular field in terms of knowledge. So you want to quote people who are experts in their field. Always, please, these are technical aspects now. Always start a quote on a new line. Don't throw a quote in the middle of a word wall. You need to start the quote on its own new line. Always. Always use quotation marks around a quote, please. And not the single things, those are commas. Just use two commas together, make a quotation mark. Please use quotation marks. It is very, very important that you do so. Because if you don't do so for your quotes, then you get a plagiarism penalty. And also in the real world, it can be much worse for you. So get into the habit now of using quotation marks. And make sure that you always attribute. Attribution is the way that journalists reference their sources. Okay? According to Mr. Nell, who heads up the Institute for Research into Sportswear. Okay, that's a pretty good attribution there, and then you can quote him as saying something. But yeah, always cite your sources. Always use journalistic attribution. whatever you do, don't use the brackets, surname, and year in a journalistic article, because that is not the way that we do it. That is only for when you are doing academic writing. For journalistic writing, you use attribution. You work your source into the sentence. Sources must be credible and relevant to the story. If you're writing a story on the, I don't know, American election, please at least find a source that is American to quote. Don't just ask any random person what they think about it, because, so what? If you're going to include a source, and if you're going to quote a source or information from a source in your article, it must be because they know what they're talking about. There must be a reason why we must listen to this person. Claims must always be backed up by factual evidence to avoid accusations of libel. So if you claim that, like for example, let's go back to this example here. This is a libel suit waiting to happen. It's a lawsuit waiting to happen. And guaranteed, KSB, Kwasiza Bantu, will, give them a lawyer, send News 24 a lawyer's letter saying cease and desist, or they will complain to the South African Press Council or whatever. They might even go the legal route and actually sue them, because they have these journalists here, these guys here, have published an article which effectively accuses these people who work at this mission of gross violations of human rights, sexual abuse, and money laundering. Those are criminal offenses. Those are big things. And when you accuse people publicly of doing those things, then it damages their reputation and their standing in the community and in society, and that is libel. But if it's true, which is where your sources, your claims, if it's true and you can back up your claims with evidence, with factual evidence, not just he said, she said, which is circumstantial, but, documentation, and witness accounts and that kind of thing, then if it is in the public interest for them to know, which of course this is, because it's, 3 different types of criminal offenses that have been committed over 40 years. So yes, people do need to know. Then you can avoid being sued, or at least successfully sued for libel. Also, the South African Press Council, which is the body that would arbitrate that kind of complaint, won't be able to say, you need to publish a letter of apology and make good in some way. And the thing is that if you publish claims against somebody that slanders a group or person's reputation and standing in the community and causes them to be treated in a bad way by people around, then the press council can, if they complain to the press council, the press council can say, yeah, that was out of line, where's your proof? If you don't have any proof, then it was out of line, you're in the wrong. And if you get that judgment against you, then they can conceivably file a lawsuit as well, in which case you would have to pay a lot of money. So libel is, hold on. Okay, I'm back. Libel is a legal term that describes the damaging of a person's or entity's reputation or a group's reputation. And you can, as we learned before, defend yourself against those claims by saying that, firstly, it's the truth. I've got proof that it's true. And secondly, it was very important for people to know this. If you're talking about I don't know, somebody's sexual proclivities in the bedroom, it's not important for everybody else to know. And so they can, even if it's true or not, they can still successfully sue you for libel, for defamation, because it's not in the public interest. It's in fact very private, and you've breached their right to privacy in that instance, and you would probably be paying a lot of money out for doing something like that. So you have to then decide, if you come across information that is, going to get you in trouble, is it worth it to publish this? Do the people need to know? Is it important that the people are aware that this is happening? And that's where the Press Code of Conduct comes in, because the Press Code of Conduct is the document that was drafted by the South African Press Council, which sets out the guidelines by which journalists can make ethical decisions. Is it the right thing to do? Does it comply with the constitutional guarantees of freedom and dignity and all of the other rights that individuals have? And how do we balance that out against the rights of the media, the press, to report and publish comment? So the Press Code of Conduct guides us in those kinds of ethical decisions. Lastly, we've got news values. News values are... News values are the characteristics in a story which determine whether it's newsworthy. So if let's go back to our example again. It is definitely, the one news value is that it is close to home. So as far as close to home is concerned, KwaZulu-Natal, for me, that's close to home. And more specifically for anyone else in Kranskorp or the surrounding areas, but also for most South Africans, because, and here we have another one, familiarity or interest or importance. We have the fact that it is featuring a Christian mission. Most South Africans are Christian. So those Christians who are living in South Africa might be interested to know about this. Those Christians who are living in KwaZulu-Natal, to which it has greater proximity, might be more interested. Also, this is important, and it is also of interest. And of course, it includes crime, and it has just been revealed. So that means that it is also timely. It's revealed in a timely fashion. It's not like 3 years old, because old news is no news, and that's why they call it news. New things, news. So all of those news values, the fact that it is close to home, we can relate to it in terms of proximity. We can relate to it in terms of familiarity. It's a Christian thing, so lots of people can relate to it, and they do sometimes get pretty defensive when it comes to their religion. So, they'd be interested to know this story, whether to support it or, not support it. And then, of course, the fact that it's just been revealed now is very important. That's another news value. And the fact that it relates to crimes is another news value. And then also that it is of importance to the public. That's another news value. So all of those news values are embodied in that article. And so that makes that article newsworthy. It's, if it was just, it happened yesterday and it took place in France and it had to do with water polo, then, it doesn't embody enough news values, or it doesn't have any news values that allow it to become a newsworthy article for our context. And you have to remember that the news values for one part of the world will differ from those news values of another part of the world, because culture changes across the world, and although ethics are very similar everywhere in journalism, what an audience values is not. So you have to take that into account as well when you decide about news values and how newsworthy an article actually is. So, having said all of that, I think that I'm done with my lecture. This has been quite a long lecture, but you can see all of these points that I've made in this document, which will be on Cole Campus for you to access. And otherwise, work on your summatives, ask the questions, work on your SUPs if you are, and ask the questions, send in your drafts. I'll be here. And have an awesome weekend. Take care, stay safe, love you, bye.